Hey guys, how's everybody doing this morning? I hope that you are having a wonderful morning. My name is Derek. I'll go ahead and pop my picture up there so you can see I'm Derek with Into Music in Odessa, and I'm joined by a good friend. This is my friend Caryn Crutchfield. Um, Caryn is one of our favorite oboists ever, and she's just a really cool person. We've also got a guy named Rick Owens joining us in Georgia, and he kind of helps us do our tech stuff. So here's one thing Caryn, I think I'm hearing you feedback into that, the volume on maybe your phone. I don't know.
Um,
Or maybe it's me. I'll take care of me. How about that? Yep, it was me. All better now. Okay. Well, then what I'm going to do is, and first of all, I just want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. I've been excited about this. Caryn and I've been talking for probably 9 months about what we could do to share with other people. Oboe is not an easy thing to master, but I think if you have a great start, you probably have a better shot at helping your students be successful. So that's kind of the vein that we started talking. What can she do to help you guys? First the first step is admitting you need help. But if she can help us in any way teach oboe better, then that's what we want to do. And so I'm probably going to mute myself, Caryn. I'm just going to leave it with you. I hope everybody enjoys this. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Caryn Crutchfield.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be with you guys today. I know the oboe better than I know anything else in my entire life, but I still have jitters and it's nuts because I really do know the oboe. Like I don't know where to put a comma sometimes, but I know how to play the oboe. So I am really glad that you're joining us today. And like Derek said, the oboe is complicated. There's a lot of things I think that make it complicated, but part of that is just that there aren't as many of your students playing these instruments. And so you want to focus on your 20 clarinet players or your 10 flute players, but one bad oboe in your band can kill you at contest, and you all know it. So hopefully by giving you some pointers today, you'll just feel more comfortable in starting your students and really having just a clear idea of how to get your oboes where you want them and where you don't just worry about them. So I was a flute player to start out with. I actually started the flute in the 5th grade after about 5 years of piano. And I started in flute class to get out of my regular 5th grade class because I saw all the kids leaving for band and I didn't want to stay in class any longer than I had to. So I joined the band late. I started on flute and I took up flute pretty quickly because I had so much piano experience and music was really important in my family. And then I got to 7th grade and there were 24 flutes in our 7th grade band. And I thought, well, forget that. I want to play something and be a little bit more unique. So I asked my director if I could switch to the oboe, and he actually didn't know how I even knew about the oboe, but my dad was a bassoonist, although a doctor, and he played bassoon. His brother played oboe. My sister played oboe. So we actually had an oboe in our closet, in our hallway closet. And that's the oboe that I started on, and then just took off from there because of all my previous experience. So that little decision really catapulted, as a 7th grader, really catapulted my career and where I've ended up. So another reason I think that it can help you is because I have quite a bit of band directing experience. So I'm hoping that I can relate the oboe to pretty much like the clarinet in some ways, not in embouchure at all, but in hand position and things like that. And you're definitely more comfortable with with the clarinet, flute, trumpet, trombone. And then you add your bigger auxiliary instruments. So hoping that I can relate it to an instrument that you feel a little bit more comfortable with, that will help. So when I start beginning oboe players, I definitely never consider whether or not they can play hot cross buns in a month. My eye is always on the prize. It's always on seeing them be successful 9th and 10th graders, so that as young players in joining your band program in the 9th and 10th grade, then they can just be like your gravy on the top. And they can really add to your ensemble. And if you have better double reeds in general, there's a lot more opportunity for music that you can perform at contests and things like that. So some of the things I'm going to show you today might not earn your student a 1 on a chair test. And I can't express to you enough how much your students value your opinion before mine. Even though I'm the professional, sometimes I will say in their lessons like, hey, you need to do this. And they're like, but if I do that, then my director, whatever. So they value you way more than they value me at first. They want to make you proud. They want you to be happy with them. They don't want to get yelled at, all those things. So it's super important too, that you're just as knowledgeable as you can be. So let's get started on hand position. I see a lot of really bad hand position out there. And it's one of the things I always check when I see videos of people, even professional musicians performing, because this to me, setting our hand position up is super, super, super important. And you just have to stay on them and stay on them and stay on them and stay on them. And even if they do something right, like all the notes come out right, if they haven't fingered it correctly or with good hand position, that should always be taken into consideration, because again, our eye's on the prize. So when I first teach hand position, I do it without the reed so that we're not having to mess around with the reed and everything. And I think just getting them to be more comfortable with their instrument, and just really concentrate on hands, because you guys all know that once you put reeds in your mouth, you go dumb. You forget how to do everything. So the left hand first finger is a really important finger. I relate this a lot to the clarinet first finger, that you, hold on just 1 second. I'm so sorry. Kids, out of the kitchen, please. How many times have you said that in your house? Okay, it's like 10:30. We're not eating lunch. All right, so first finger is really, really, really important. It deals with our half whole finger. Our half whole finger is going to be moving back and forth a lot, and just getting more comfortable with this half whole finger. But if you look, you can really relate this probably to the first finger on the clarinet, how you want that finger to pop up to the A key, and not be picking up and putting down. This finger, I tell students that this finger needs to be connected to your oboe, like with a little piece of string that's sewn from the middle finger onto the oboe. A lot of students pick this finger up, and I'll show you examples of that. The left hand third finger is probably the most problematic finger in 95% of oboe players. So if you look at me, I am a lot more curved here. If you look at most people, they really pull this third finger out. And when you pull the third finger out, you can see kind of what that does to everything. It puts your wrist in a funky position. And I always say I don't want them to have these knuckles at all. I want them just to disappear and kind of go flat. So if I hold my oboe up, I'm in a little bit of an awkward position here, but if I hold my oboe up, it's a straight line pretty much from my knuckles all the way to my elbow. And I don't have these knuckles out like this. You can see that just gets you into straight fingers and not curved. And our fingers are going to move a lot faster if we're moving from this part of our knuckle instead of up and down and floppy. And then it's hard for this first finger to do what it's supposed to do. So I lovingly, not so lovingly, refer to this as the oboe gang sign, because it's just like the weirdest thing. So why would you do that? That doesn't look comfortable. It doesn't look like you can be as successful, like, man, that person really knows what they're doing with that hand position.
It is really good that I was
also,
muted, Caryn.
Huh?
It's really good that I was muted, because that was a bust out awkward laugh on the gang sign. So thanks.
Oboe gang sign. I've called it that for a long time because it's like, I play the oboe and throw a gang sign. So if you take your hands off the oboe, that's what it looks like. And that does not look like somebody that knows what they're doing at all. So, and it causes so much tension. So when this third finger is straight, it causes tension all the way through this part of my arm. And I've always said this, like, they may not notice it as a resilient 7th or 8th grader, but as a 30-year-old or 20-something-year-old, that's going to start to hurt. And I actually saw that finally happen in one of my college students this year. I have a student who's come back to college a little bit later than most, and she told me, like, man, I've been hurting all the way into my wrist, into my arm. And I said, it's that third finger, you got to fix it. So all these fingers should be curved. Your knuckles should flatten out here, and you shouldn't have these knuckles out. And you can just see, like, by doing that. So kind of check your kids when you can. If you have them turning in videos right now for their assignments, kind of check those. This might not be something that you can check, that you can fix right now, but it's something that you can definitely fix for later, because it's never too late to try and fix it. So also the same holds true for the right hand. So the right hand should be curved too. And I see a lot of, again, it's not, I don't know, it's weird. I don't even know how they do it, but it's this third finger really locked out here too. And a lot of my students will say, well, it's just hard because, you know, when you start as 6th graders, these keys can be kind of far apart. But why would you pull yourself farther away? Like, get up close, get your hands closer to the oboe, and just stay close. And that will keep everything more bent. So this is constant with me, with my beginners, even some more advanced students who don't fix it. And I'll tell them, like, this will come back to haunt you once you have to start doing some alternate fingerings on the left side. So the top hand, this third finger that we were talking about earlier, it operates all of these keys right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this finger has to be able to move around to all these keys. If you're locked out, you're really at a disadvantage of what keys you can even touch and move, because this finger has so much tension in it. So if you also, when we go to use the inside E flat, so you need the inside E flat, the left hand E flat for key of A flat, key of D flat, anytime that you can't move the right hand without hopping. So once you get to 9th grade and you have your all region etudes, a lot of times they're in the higher keys, maybe the key of E, maybe the key of A flat or D flat. And so to get to a left E flat, then you have to move this whole finger over to do that. So this whole finger has to, or this whole part of your hand has to move. And then a lot of times you'll come off this itty bitty hole in the back and have that note not speak. So if you start in good hand position, then your pinky is over that E flat key anyway. And you can kind of pull back, and it just gives you a way to have some movement in there without having to have a lot of movement. You just need tiny little movements. That shouldn't be a lot. So before I get off hand position, there's one, well, actually there's a few things more. Sorry, there's a lot. So your top thumb should be like clarinet also, where you point to like 1 or 2 o'clock. That's hard to show you backwards, but about 1 to 2 o'clock. And your thumb is going to come up and hit this key. It doesn't need to roll kind of like a clarinet. And you'll see I have a 3rd octave key, which is just on fancier models. But they can pick this up and put it down, but it should always come back down. It shouldn't be like a free floating digit there in the back. So that should come up and come down, and they don't have to roll to do that. The right hand thumb should be under your thumbnail. Sorry, that's a weird angle, but I see a lot of this. Okay, and then that just puts your hands in a funky position over here. So it should be on your thumbnail, maybe a little farther. There's like a indentation on your thumb if you feel it. And I think God made it for us to play the oboe. So you just put it right in there, and then it sits, and don't let it come past the knuckle too far. Sorry if that's weird to see. Okay, so the last thing on our top hand position is eventually we're going to have to move this finger down to what we call half hole. So you have your little half hole key here. Actually under this little hole, it looks like a cat's eye, which is kind of interesting. So when you move to half hole, that helps us play in our upper octaves, but we only use it for 3 notes. One of the reasons that the oboe is so complicated. Actually, on the oboe, the half hole is a super important key, and total, even in our upper octaves, we use it on like, well, once we get super high, like high E, high F, this is above the staff, you use half hole. So, but it's our gateway to everything. So the half hole finger, this is the hardest habit to break if they start to do this, and you have to watch them like crazy, because all of a sudden they start doing it and you're like, how did you even learn to do that? Because we weren't even doing that last week or 2 days ago. So part of it is that you put these like super brainy kids on the oboe, and then they figure out how to do things right or wrong. They figure out a solution of some sort. So you want to be sure that this finger stays connected to the oboe. There's only 1 note on the oboe that you don't use the half hole finger, only 1. So sometimes when students get into super high notes, they just think anything works. They don't have to really think about fingerings, which isn't true. But only 1 note on the oboe doesn't have first finger either down or on half hole. So I assign TV time. I learned this from my teacher in college, to do your TV time, or hey, bassoons, while I'm working with the bassoons, oboes, do your TV time exercise. And that's just to move this first finger back and forth and not pick up. So I'm going to try and show you. A lot of students will half hold down, like they'll slide down, but then they'll pick up and they do this. So you can't ever be a super smooth player if you do that, ever. And they get to be really fast at it. And even if they're really fast at it and really good at it, it's still wrong. So the half hole finger, they should half hold down, and they should half hole up. So half hole down, half hole up. And if you'll see, for many, many, many years, I've heard this called a roll, to roll your hand. And when I roll, do you see what that does to the rest of my hand? So I don't want these fingers to move. I want these fingers to stay exactly where they are, and the half hole finger to move independently. And you'll see a lot of this. And if you teach a true roll, it's a lot of wrist movement, and that's just not sustainable as they start to play faster. So those are things you need to watch out for. So mine is kind of a slide roll. slide. I feel like I slide way more than I roll that first finger. But it does roll a little bit out. Okay. Are there any questions about that before I move on?
So far, there haven't been any questions, but you have had a few comments.
Good ones or bad?
A few about the kids, and Eric Baker stopped in for a moment, and he had to run, but he said you're doing a great job. Angel Dodson says, and you have to keep that left-hand ring finger curved to make sure the hole is covered. Quoting back on something you had said earlier. And that's all we have so far.
Yeah, this hole down here on the right hand ring finger, it's like the biggest hole that even exists. And it's a pretty big hole. So you really do have to make sure that that's curved and not flat, and just curved third fingers in general. They need to all be curved. And that just helps your hand position in general. Your pinky over here on the right hand side, it operates these 3 pinky keys down here. And if this is locked out, it's hard to reach that D flat again. So the third, and having little hands doesn't matter. Have them get in there. But when you start 6th grade beginners, you're starting some pretty little kids. I started a pretty little kid this year. We had a little bit of struggle with this hand position. So don't let that, just keep your eye on the prize, like the eyes on the prize, not the eyes on tomorrow and whether or not they can get a 1. If they do, if they did something, if they played and they played with good hand position, but the note didn't come out, I would put them ahead of somebody that had all the notes come out, especially at first, because they're at least attempting to do it the right way. But then they figure out pretty quickly, like, oh, hey, that person did it this way and they did better than me. So they're going to figure that out. And we have to do our job as educators to make sure that everything is happening the right way.
Caryn,
like I see all your notes came out, but you didn't have your hands in the right position. Yeah.
Can the trumpet player ask a question?
Let's see.
Let's back up just a little bit. And this is all fascinating to me, but do you subscribe to the theory that certain physical characteristics of a child lend itself to the oboe, or is it more about do you look for somebody who is dedicated and will do things the right way? Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, we all have your lip structure or your whatever physical characteristic lends itself to this instrument. Do you feel that way about the oboe? I don't know. I'm asking.
Yeah, so the oboe is pretty forgiving as far as embouchure. We're going to talk about embouchure in a little bit. Probably like an underbite wouldn't be great because we're always trying to go for a little bit of an overbite. But
you mentioned small hands though, so
overbitey. I think it's something to check, but also to acknowledge that they're going to grow. So the student that I had this year, he's the first student and he was able to move super fast. Like he's super smart, but his physical structure was just a little bit limiting because he was having a really hard time with this third finger. And I was like, buddy, we're just going to keep moving forward and keep doing stuff, but you're on the right track. And you're going to get there. So you know that they're going to probably grow from the 6th grade, right? I mean, If they don't, then that's weird because most people grow past 6th grade. But I look way more for personality characteristics on the oboe before I look for hand position.
And that's really where I was going. Everybody, I tease Angel a lot. Angel is a road person for us, as an ed rep in Fort Worth and an oboist. Right. And I tease her all the time about, oh, there's your oboe showing. And I don't know if, and she knows I'm teasing, but is intelligence, personality, is that a strong factor for you in picking a person or in choosing an oboist or success on the oboe?
Sure, I think so. And I think that you don't necessarily have to have somebody who's super outgoing and super over the top. Like the most bubbly person in the room like, I don't think that you have to consider that, but you have to look to see if they're determined, if they have grit, if there's somebody that when the going gets tough, they're not going to give up. They're going to go, oh, heck no, I'm going to figure this out. So it takes a little bit of that. And me as an adult I am a lot different of a person from me as a young child. I was pretty quiet and pretty timid. And people that don't know me at first don't see that side of me, or see that side of me more than like my friends, because they'll go, oh, well, you're super outgoing. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I know you. So that's different. But I do think determination, grit, persistence, never gives up. Those are qualities that I look for before I would look for super bubbly, outgoing. And if those all come together, that's fine.
I was kind of the opposite. I wanted to sound the best in, trumpets. But somebody that will say, okay, I'm going to do this right.
Yeah. So I saw that in my my daughter a while back. She wanted to learn how to do a back bend. And so I was helping her because even though I'm a really tall adult, I was in gymnastics as a child. And my daughter came to me and wanted to learn how to do a back bend. So we were working on some different ways of how I could help her do a back bend. And she came out of the room and she was crying. And I was like, what happened, honey? And she said, I hurt myself. And she's crying. And I said, okay, come here. And I hugged her and I did the mom thing. And then I looked at her and I said, okay, so this is the time where you decide, like, I'm going to try it again, or I'm just going to quit. Because that's where you go next. And she's like, and she looked me straight in the eye and she goes, I don't give up. And at that very moment, I thought, and you need to play the oboe. Because she was determined. And she said that to me quite a bit, like, well, I don't give up, Mom. I'm like, I know you don't. So that's why you play the oboe. But it's just that, I think just the determination that although frustrating and although hard, you're not going to give up.
Awesome.
So,
Thanks.
and you're not going to sound good at first. You're going to sound really bad, actually. Most people don't.
I'm not sure that's a selling point with them.
No, you're going to sound bad. And most people, it's like the ugly duckling that turns into a swan. Like, it's just an ugly duckling kind of instrument. And that's okay. If you sound really good, which happens very rarely, but if you sound really good, you're probably using some tension that you don't need to use, because we do learn how to control that as we move through the whole learning process.
I'll shut up, but as a director, do I have to sell the oboe on the kids that, to the kids that I wanted to, or do they just kind of naturally go, yeah, that sounds fun?
A lot of times they like the sound of it. If they've heard a good recording. I would tell them that this is a really special instrument, that we don't choose many people, that we really look for qualities that make this an easier instrument to start. I can just spot them. I don't know. It's a gift. But when I was a band director many years ago at Goddard Junior High, they told me, your job is to sit there and watch kids walk in the room and figure out who should play oboe. So I don't know. I think that if kids like a challenge, it's not something that you definitely necessarily have to sell or convince them to play.
We have a question from one of our folks in Andrews. Tiara wants to know, do you switch? Are you a proponent of switching people from other instruments, or do you think you should start them on the oboe from the get-go?
So I know that this is just my opinion, but I'm also an oboe player. So starting beginners is not something that I mind doing. If you don't know those students and you kind of want to check their personalities and get to know them before you switch, something that I might look for, but But so to answer your question, I would love to see oboe players started, because then they switch and they feel like they're behind. But if that's not a strong suit, or if you find somebody that you think should switch, that's fine too. Where I teach currently is a fine arts magnet school, and I teach 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. So we don't offer the oboe that young, but I've already kind of have my radar on kids that I think when they move to junior high could switch. So I think either way it could happen. One thing I might look for, I think flute's pretty easy switch, just because there's not a real, the embouchure is set, but it's not like super strict embouchure, if that makes sense, and not to disqualify anything about the flute embouchure, but I did start there. So I'm more familiar with that. But with clarinet, I would look for somebody who is smart, but just can't keep the embouchure, like just can't stay firm enough, or like always wants to kind of let their embouchure sag, or can't get their tongue in the right place, like doesn't have the whole tongue arch thing down. Those are people that I might look at for the oboe.
Awesome. That catches us up.
Okay, good. All right. So kind of want to see time-wise how we're doing. Oh my gosh, that took 30 minutes. Okay, that's what I was afraid of, because I can talk about this all day long. So I want to talk about the embouchure real quick. And we can do part 2 if you guys are interested. We could always do a part 2 if I don't get to everything. So on the embouchure, your teeth should be as open as possible while still keep your mouth shut. So one way that I have found is to pretend like you are yawning and you don't want to be rude by like mouth open or not covering your mouth or whatever. But so you try and keep your yawn inside your mouth. So you can do it at home. No one can see you. I'll show you. But if you just sit there and then you open your teeth as far apart as you can, but keep your lips shut. So when you do that, it pulls you right into the right position. So it gets your jaw down. It gets everything centered and open, and get your teeth apart. And pull your corners in. You can think of like a drawstring purse, breathing in an oval, like thinking, oh, when you breathe, and getting that just as open as possible. And the bottom lip is going to be spongy, and the reed rests on the bottom lip. And you want to avoid rolling in too far with your bottom lip. So I like to see just a little bit of red, that I know that they still have lips. Sometimes their lips go away and they roll in too far, like that. And it sometimes looks to me like a Muppet. Because then when you breathe like that, and looks like a puppet. So if you have your reed on your lip, and then you get the teeth as open as possible. So, so corners are in, and your mouth is really open. And I teach about half, let me find about half of the reed in your mouth. Okay, so when you get more reed in your mouth, if you get it down to here, your reeds don't have as good of a chance of vibrating the way that they're supposed to, or us have any control. So we don't want to control so much, but there are little movements that we do in and out, tiny bit here, not very much. And when I say a little bit, like a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit. So if I have half the reed in my mouth, it sounds like this. Okay, that should be close to a C. I'll talk about that in a minute. So should be close to a C. If I go in farther, you'll hear that we start to get what's called the crow of our reeds. So Okay, this reed isn't quite crowing how I want it to. It's a little bit dry. It's just been sitting here. But which sound, so this is the amplifier. Which sound do we want amplified? The first sound or the second? Right? So that's what, if they have too much reed up to the wrap, that's what's going to happen. Okay. So just becoming really comfortable with how much reed is in your mouth. A lot of times I feel like I have to feel like I'm pulling away instead of going forward. Their head will come down, their oboe will go in, and we want to avoid that. So you want to just be about halfway. And I'll play a C for you, and I'll show you the difference of just this, like, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch. So here's all the different, all I'm changing is how much reed I have in my mouth. So all that can change just with like this 1 inch. This 1 inch is like you sounding great at contest and you sounding awful. By one person, that 1 inch can make that much of a difference. So you want just, if you're getting your reeds through Intune, which, I mean, why wouldn't you? If you're getting your reeds through Intune and they're mine, they have a line, and I always say to put your mouth right below the line of the reed. By the way, Intune has quite a few of my reeds right now because we're in quarantine. And so I've had a little bit more time to make them. Now's a good time to stock up. So
Look at you
I teach
go.
right below the, huh?
Look at you. I was about to ask you, where did you get that wonderful looking reed?
No, look at that.
All right, I'll be quiet.
Okay. Yeah, they actually have quite a few, like way more than they've had all year, because I started this new job as a fine arts band director and I just haven't had the time, but it's getting better. I'm learning. So about half of the reed in your mouth, and that's gonna, the pitch, if you find that your students typically are playing high, they probably have too much reed in their mouth. They now you should not be alternating or adjusting your reed in your mouth for every note. But if you're typically on the high side all the time, you might have too much reed in your mouth. If everything else looks good here, if you're relaxed, if you're not rolled in too far, then it might just be too much reed. I actually didn't learn this until about my 3rd year of college, which, yeah. So I finally learned how to play in tune, and I got a pat on my head from Dr. Garner. So if you just find that your tone is a bit brilliant, you're sharp all the time, your oboe players are sharp all the time, you might want to check that and see. Now, since we've been talking, I soaked my reed up before we started, and I picked it up and I just wet it a little bit with my mouth. You don't always have to use water. There's a lot of rules of, like, a lot of thoughts about that. Some people only use water. Some people soak the reeds in their mouth. I grew up where my teacher just put her reed in her mouth and never used water. I use a little bit of both. Sometimes I just don't like to mess with water because it seems like it always spills on something. So I'll put it in my mouth. But your students need to feel comfortable doing both. Now, I wanted to show you, I have 4 good reeds here, and they have been soaking in a cup. And so many times I see this in band halls. So these 4 reeds have been soaking in a cup for about half an hour. And my other reed that I was going to use has just been sitting here on my desk. Now, I will still have to wet this a little bit if I want to play on it, but nothing like what this needs to be. So I think that you can find the right reed for the day and then take the rest out of the water, because reeds change. Every day they're different. And one day your favorite read will be your least favorite read the very next day. And then it will go back to being your favorite the next day again. So I don't think I can show you, but these two now have really sprung open. I don't know if you can see that. But that's not going to be a reed that your students are going to be able to play on. They're probably going to be super flat. And I'll show you. And that takes a lot of energy to play. And then, yeah, that takes a lot of energy too. And all four of these reeds look like that. So when you leave these reeds in water constantly, they remind me of when a tree falls in a river or a lake and it gets really spongy and too soft and we just lose control. So your reed, this is the one that I've been playing on. And this is one, you can hear the difference. So I can get that closed down again just by pinching the very, very, very tip, very, very, very end of the tip, like most of the reed is still showing. But it will sound better if I just let it become not waterlogged. Yeah, and if I try and play on this, it's not going to sound good. Okay, so that's not a sound you want, but when the reed goes straight from water into the oboe, that's what I see most of the time in your band halls, and that's not ideal. Ideally, they should be able to make a few little sounds on their reeds. Peter Cooper at Colorado Boulder, he teaches this a lot, that your reed should sound like when it makes its first sound on the oboe, it shouldn't be the first sound you've made. So your students need to get comfortable just like messing around on the reed. Just making like silly sounds, and they feel silly at first. I actually have quite a bit of fun doing this. My husband will laugh at me because I do it without even thinking about it. And this is a much different feel. You can hear it, and that takes a lot more effort, and it's no fun to play on those reeds. So you don't want to over soak your reeds. And once you decide on a reed, all the rest of the reeds need to go away, and they need to go away dry. So don't put those reeds back into your case being wet. And reeds really are, besides the other issues that happen with the oboe, reeds really are like the biggest problem. And when their one reed breaks the day of contest, you're in a world of trouble, because they've been playing on this one reed because it feels good and they don't have any more broken in. So ideally they should have 3 in their case and be alternating between those 3. My case holds 6, so I keep 6 in there and I rotate through. If I get a reed that I don't like, I take it out and I get another one into the rotation. So
can I interrupt? So even starting at beginning, we should have a reed case as part of our equipment roster.
Yes, the reed cases, a lot of times, well, sometimes they'll come in these little coffins like this, or the tubes. These are for shipping only. Like, they should never be your reed case. You should
so
always
we're talking
have
like
a reed
Hodge
case.
makes the 3 prongs, the black case that folds in half, something of that nature. Well, you've got one in your hand. There you go. That's a 2, I think.
Yeah, and Hodge, Intune, I have gotten them to carry that case because I'm not a fan. I actually have one sitting here. Not being a fan, I actually should not have one sitting here, but I do. So these cases with the prongs on them, I don't like them because they don't always stay on. And then your most fragile part of your reed hits the tip. Like the thinnest, it hits this and it'll chip the tip of your reeds.
Okay.
So I prefer the ribbon style Reed cases. So the ribbon style, you have the ribbon across, and then your reeds just fit right in there. I guess my reed holds
Okay.
more than 6. 1, 2,
Note
3,
to self, get
79.
ribbon style cases.
Yeah, ribbon. So Ann Hodge has those, and that holds 3 reeds.
Okay.
They're not very expensive. So if a case for 3 isn't enough, they could even get 2, and they fit in their cases easier. So the ribbon is, to me, a lot better. They stay more secure. Once you put this flat part down or cover it, then it stays like this, and they
I'm
don't
probably
have as
showing
much
my
of a
age
chance.
here, but those remind me of like old cigarette cases,
Yeah,
the snapshot.
Yeah.
But
and that's what some people use. But you can find fun ones. But Ann Hodge does the trick. You can get
perfect.
it into.
Thank you.
So, let me reposition here. So there's a lot of different opinions about whether or not you should crow on your reed. I think crowing is more for the reed maker than your student. The rule is that your reed should crow a C. Now, does that mean that if your student can't make that reed crow a C, that they're doing something wrong? No, that doesn't mean that at all. It means that maybe that reed never was going to crow a C. I make my reeds when I start a little bit low. So if you get a brand new reed from me, it's probably going to be a little bit flat. After the students break those in a little bit, they come up to pitch. They'll come up to being able to play in tune. So I think that's an interesting thought, because a reed, if you want your students to be able to crow a C, that's really for the reed maker. That's really what they should do. And those reeds should crow a C before you have them in your hands. And that's just not the case. Not all reeds do that. And not all reed makers make sure that that happens. So making your student then crow a C, and you're like, you have to crow a C or else you're going to get not a good grade on your chair test, then they're going to figure out what to do, how to make that happen. So I'm way more concerned that it's an ease. I don't try and make them tune on their reeds at first. I don't think I ever do that, honestly, with my older students either. I just want them to be really comfortable, like have them play songs, like have them play Mary Had Little Lamb just on their reed, and just get comfortable with that. But even my students that are in my studio, they just don't feel really comfortable with their reeds, even though I push it. I'm like, just like tweet on the reed a little bit. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, just like mess around on your reed. So they're just not comfortable with that. Like just messing around on the reed a little bit. So, so let me just go back. So your reeds should never come straight out of the water like this into their mouth, into their oboe, and just start playing. There's water that's trapped in here. They might have been soaking for too long, so you can soak the water out. You can also plug the bottom and see if it has a seal. You can like make it pop. I don't know if you could hear that. And then if it's a little bit open, they could even close it a little bit. Tip of the tip, not very far. You have most of the reed still showing. So I've done all those things with this reed, and let me see. It's still a little bit too open, just from soaking so long. But it's playing a little bit better, but it will play a lot better once this reed dries out a little bit. Maybe I'll leave it here and see if we get back to it. Are there any questions about reeds, embouchure?
I'm going to ask one because, and this is from the retail side of it. We sell so many of your reads. We have others in the store as well. We have young children or, young students come in and they'll like look at the end of the read and do this whole examination of the read before they buy it. What? As I'm just like, look, it's a good read. Buy it. Are there things that we can acknowledge that they're saying, should this be like this? As I'm talking about from my standpoint, but also from a director. If you look at a student's read and go, oh, well, here's the issue. What are we look? Are we looking for an oval where the corners touch? Are we looking, if we're looking down the end of the read, are we looking for anything specific to know that it's time for a new read?
So playing time goes, well, besides damage. So
do they have
besides
a
like
life?
a crack.
Let me ask you that. Do they have a life? What's the expectancy of a well cared for read?
So this is part of why it's good to rotate, because your reads are going to have a little bit more life in them when you rotate. When you play on the same read every day, every time, that read wears out faster. One, because it's staying wet longer than if you're alternating your reads. I find when I have, because I make a lot of reads for you guys now, and sometimes they dry funky. And so you want a read, when you look at it, you want it to be like, let me draw it because I think it's going to be a little bit easier for you to see. You want a read where the sides do touch, but if they don't touch just by a little bit, I don't think that's, because that read is going to close down as they play on it. So it looks more like this shape.
Right. That's what I would expect it to look like.
Yeah.
But if they separate at the corners a little?
You don't want it to be like too much like that.
Right.
And you don't want it to be like this. So in the middle of those, where it's just like flat.
Okay.
Or flat, sorry, flat. It's hard for me to.
Well, I have this theory that if people have the right equipment and quality equipment too, they'll be more successful and they'll enjoy it more. So I just want to make sure that I ask that question.
Yes, absolutely. If they're like reads that are too hard and that are too open and that don't sound good, would you want to be that person? Would you want to be that sound in the band that you hear everybody going, oh my gosh, that oboe? Like, no one would ever
say that anyway.
That. Huh?
I might say that anyway from the brass section, but
so
I guess what I'm saying though is even as a director, should I not first go, before I say something negative, let me see your read?
If you know what you're looking for.
That's what I'm asking. Okay.
Yeah. If you know what you're looking for, I mean, it might just be a cracked read, like, or have them check, ask them, say, you're really flat. Do you think, is your read pushed in all the way? That's another, I'm glad that we're talking about this, because that's another thing, is that the read needs to go all the way in, all the way. The read is a continuation of this constant cone shape. So the reed, if it's pulled out, you break the cone. And before you should pull out a reed out of the reed well, like they say, pull out a little bit, the student should take less reed in their mouth. That's one way. Like if they're really sharp, they should just be playing with less reed anyway.
Okay.
But I mean,
I do have a few questions along this line if you want me to jump in, or did I interrupt?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So we got 3 questions. Number 1, do you recommend your reads for beginners? In other words, do you recommend Caryn Crutchfield reads for beginners, or is there another read that they should start on, or yours for more advanced players? I'll let you answer that before I go on.
What I send to Intune, I try and do like a standard medium. I don't have like easy or hard reads. I don't want to play on hard reads. Bad habits start when you play on hard reads because you have to put more pressure on the read. So what I send to Intune is a medium, and I really think that it's good for beginners or on up. Your usually your more advanced students are going to be in private lessons anyway. So they're going to have a little bit more assistance with reads, and then their teachers could help them, because hopefully they're studying with somebody that knows something about reads and can adjust those reads for them once they get to that point.
Well, that leads me to question number
I would
2.
start.
The question is, do you recommend band directors who don't necessarily play the oboe to start oboe students, or should we have them start with somebody who is an oboe player?
I think if you are a band director, that you need to be comfortable starting anybody. So you need to do your job as a director to be as knowledgeable as you can be. And you would never not start clarinets because you're not comfortable with clarinets. You would never not start flutes because your primary instrument is the trumpet. You would never do that. You would understand that all of the instruments have an importance in the band, and they make having a variety of music that you can perform and play. Like, once you have the auxiliary instruments, you open up so many opportunities for different pieces that you can perform. So a little tough love here to some of my band directors. If you're not comfortable with the instrument, get comfortable with the instrument. You never say that about any other instruments, but for some reason, the double reeds we allow to follow into that gray area, like, well, I just don't get them. Well, there are plenty of resources that you can use. I have a lot of band directors ask me different advice. My band directors that are open to it, I'll even say, hey, I noticed that this is happening with this student. If you could just watch that. And then if it's a team effort, it's not me saying, hey, you're not doing a very good job as a teacher. It's me just saying, hey, I'm a professional. I see this happening. You might not see it happening. And that way, you know what you can check for. There are some band director oboe workshops through a very well-known new company kind of in Texas, that I know that some of my friends have gone to the oboe workshops, that you could look into those things. But
or we could have one with you.
You could do that with me.
And we've got Angel.
Yes.
We've got people that can help.
Yes. You have people that can help, one, if you're just willing to talk to them and be teachable. Don't be defensive or think that, you're like, if I was not doing something right, like with the clarinet, I would hope a clarinet player would say, hey, I've noticed this with your students. This is something you might want to check.
Right. But, and I'm going to temper that a little bit. Understand that a lot of people, and I know that some of the people that we have with us today are not necessarily, maybe they're a smaller community and they're a little farther away from metropolitan or whatever larger areas. And they feel like they're kind of out there on their own. And so I think I just did my Woody impression. I think that sometimes we just push it aside because I don't have somebody, I'm not confident with it. I'm just going to keep that over there. I'm going to stay away from that literature, and I'm just not going to worry about it. And so in those situations, those people are the people that have to teach that if they're going to use that, right?
Right.
But that's why I think something like this, where we can share and do this in this format, really much, it's just confidence level. Even now, I'll be in my sales floor and somebody will come in and ask about PA equipment. I'm like, hey, PA salesman, come over here. Right. And gracefully back out. We just have to figure out who our sources are and rely on the sources till we get comfortable. Agreed?
Right. Okay. And I mean, with knowledge comes comfort, and all you have to do is stay one step ahead of your kids. And that we've been told that a lot. Like when I learned clarinet and I started teaching clarinet, I was told you only have to stay one or two steps ahead of your kids. So you can do that. And if you have the skills and you have the comfort, then you can just feel more secure. But part of it is just going for it. Like, you have to start somewhere, just go for it. I want to cover one last thing before we run out of time, because it's something so important for my...
Can I ask the last question? I don't want them to feel slighted.
Yes.
The last question was, By the way, I'm just catching up to the conversation, and that's funny, Tiana. Uh, Emily Andrews Glenrose said, "Can you adjust it?" Talking about the read. If it's looking bad, can you adjust it, or do you get a new read?
It depends what is actually wrong with it, because if it's a chipped tip, you can't just clip it, and because it gets too thick pretty quickly.
Okay.
So yeah.
Back to you. I'm out of the way.
Unless you're comfortable with reads, I probably would not try and do any adjustment, especially the day of contest. Don't do that. Okay, one last thing, and I really, there's a lot more I could talk about another day if you guys would like to come back. So in your method books, I feel like there was one fingering chart made like 50 years ago, and everyone just keeps using that same fingering chart. There are mistakes in it. There are things that, there's one huge mistake that I want to tell you about. So we have what's called a semi-automatic octave key. So when you put down the back octave key, this key pops up.
I knew oboes were weapons.
When you put down the side octave key, those things that puts the bottom octave key down. So your method books, like if you look at your method book, it may show the back octave. So we're talking about notes up in this range, A to C sharp, I'm sorry, A to C right here. So we're talking about A to C. A, B flat, B, and C, they need your back and side octave key down. So you're going from G or A flat with your back octave key, and then you leave your back octave key down. So your back octave key is down from E to A flat, and then you put your side octave key down for A to C, but your back stays on. And your method books may show that as optional, or it may not have it down at all. So I take my beginner books and I put the back octave, I write that in for those 4 notes. So we're talking A above the staff, B flat, B natural, and C. They should have back and side octave key. I see so many students, if they haven't had lessons as beginners, they come to me later on, and when they go to A, they pop off their back octave key. And so that just makes them do work that they don't need to do, and it is limiting. And I see this all the time. It's probably among students that haven't started with me a bit as beginners, it's probably that and picking up half full finger. Those are the 2 mistakes that are most prevalent. So even the method books, you just have to check them, because they're just not right. They're not correct. So high A, B flat, B, and C should be fingered with back and side octave key on together. Forever and ever, amen. And that's the last thing that I wanted to make sure. I know we're up against an hour.
Okay, so if I'm a director in front of my group, and I know that we're talking about all different levels, or we seem to be kind of transitioning back and forth between high school and beginners. But what's the key in my head? If I'm teaching them one-on-one in woodwind class, then yeah, I'm going to go look for that. But what is the telltale that they're not doing that? That they're not using the back octave key with them?
Well, so yet again, this is like my eye being on the prize, and not whether or not they can do this in Crown Point March. It's whether or not they can do this when we're in high school trying out for all region and all state. So you just have to watch them, like in like in their sectionals. It's stuff that you have to watch out for. And it's important then for your beginner teachers to know, like when we do this, so you have to, as a beginner teacher, one, be teaching it the right way. But it's a really hard thing to switch, and to, because they'll go, well, I've been doing it this whole way, this whole time, and it's been fine. So to me, this is a mistake that should be caught at the beginner level. If it's not, then it's something that when you're in your studio class, your master class, like, well, why can't you do that? Oh, I see you're flipping your back octave key off when you go to A. It should stay on. And you might just have to do some slow remedial work with that.
Okay. So if we were looking at your notes, how far did we get through them?
Really through Embouchure, which is
Okay.
number 2 out
Okay.
of 7. Well,
Well-
however, we did cover 7 about read sources. So I am good at making reads.
You are.
I'm good at it. Like I said, I don't sometimes know where to put a comma, but I know how to play the oboe, and I'm a really good reed maker. I didn't realize in college that some people weren't making reeds. I thought everybody was doing it, and I just needed to keep working. So I'm one of the weird ones that does not mind making reeds when I have time to do it. I'm really happy with the relationship that I have with Intune, and that they have taken an instrument that they don't work with as much and taking it seriously enough to bringing you this masterclass today, to carrying my reeds, to be open to using the reed cases that I like and not just rolling their eyes at me. And I'm really thankful for that. So I hope that you would be happy buying reeds of mine through Intune. And that's what I suggest.
And they're available online. So if you just need to pop on the web, and they're on our website there as well. We think they're fantastic and a great value.
Well, your reed, if you're comfortable, the reed is really key in comfort. So if your reeds are too hard, if they're too open, if they're too any of these things, that right there sets you up for failure. So just having a really good reed to start learning how to take care of your reeds, not over soaking them, putting them in a reed case, all those things, not putting them away wet. Just good reed care is going to help more than anything.
Can I ask you about that? When you say don't put them away wet, most of us, well, I won't put everybody else in my category. We use every second we have in a rehearsal. And then we say, no, you're not leaving until I say you're leaving. And then all of a sudden the kids rush and they have to get to their next class or do something else. And they just stuff it in whatever they stuff it in and stuff it in the case so they can get to class on time. How do you not put it away wet?
Okay, so this was a student I asked the other day. I said, do you swab your instrument every time when you leave band? And he's like, well, usually we don't have time. So I took, let's see if I have my swab right here. I took my swab and I counted seconds as I did it. I was like, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, it took me 5 seconds. Like, okay, so you beginner might take 10. Like, I'm not talking about just a lot of time, but students, so let me go back to this. So students get all their reeds out, they put them in their reed cup, and then they take wet reeds and they put that in their case.
Got it.
And that still has I would say 5 drips of water just by doing that. And I got more water again and more water again and more water again.
So I'm guessing you could just straw it out and damp is okay, just not soaking wet.
Yeah. So not coming from here because there's a lot of water still in there. Did you see that?
Yeah.
When I did that. So there's a lot of water still in there, enough to wet my pants. Not wet my pants. I'm not wetting my pants, but to get a water spot on my pants.
Your oboe's showing.
So yes. So they can blow it out the bottom and just get the excess water off. I'm just talking about taking reeds from your water cup, putting them away, or they'll put their reed back in their water cup to swab their oboe or to put it away. And then they take their reed out of their water cup and they're putting all that back in there. And that's not good because wet things in dark places usually mold. And you also don't want moldy reeds because that's disgusting.
That's the other thing I was going to say. I spent my first several years as a woodwind tech, and I've seen things on reeds that would cure a disease. Or cause one.
Yeah.
I realize that's probably sensitive right now, but okay. Well, I do think that I have one last question. I'm putting you on the spot. I don't mean to. If somebody needs to contact you to ask you questions, do you have a place that you mind sharing? Or, you know, I don't want to give out your phone number or anything like that. I'm just saying, is there somewhere they could get a hold of you through us or?
Sure. My email is Caryn Crutchfield at gmail.com. So Caryn is Caryn and Crutchfield is CRUTCH field, the word field, Crutchfield at gmail.com. I might prefer to have a conversation with you or like a FaceTime message, because I think sometimes it's hard for me to put, so this goes back to my whole comma problem. I can't put my thoughts sometimes down in a paper way. I would rather show you or talk to you about it. And I'm happy to answer those questions, because the more successful you are, the better it makes me. When I have your students, I'm not having to correct remedial problems. I can help them just like take off if I happen to get them as a student. Or if you're more successful and like the comfort, then you're not afraid to start beginners anymore. And you're not afraid to venture into the unknown. But yeah. And right now I have more time. I could do like some FaceTime lessons. I've done some of that. I have one college student, so I've done that with her. And some of my younger kids, I've done FaceTime with them.
Cool. All right. Well, I was checking for any last minute questions. Yes, Emily, I will get those reeds to the Alito store. If they don't have any right now, I've stolen them back on occasion as we've needed them, but I will make sure that we get you some out there now. I
have about 30 reads started right now that aren't very far from, I mean, it will be another week or so, but I have about 30 going right now.
And this is going to sound like a salesman thing to say, but you need to buy more than one per student because they all need to have a rotation. So if you want them to be successful and your band to sound good, they need to have multiple reads. That sound like a salesman, or is that just fact?
Well, no, it's truth. And here's when your reed breaks the day of contest. That's when it breaks. So it doesn't break like in your 10 rehearsals leading up to contest. You're like, oh man, the oboe sound great. They're in tune. They're all on their perfect reed. And then like the wind blows and nobody sounds good on anything anymore. So, which happens, like it will go from 80 degrees to like 45, and that will affect your reeds, all that pressure. So you want to have many reeds in rotation. I say at least 3.
Right. Awesome. I'll get those out there, Em. We want to thank you, ma'am. Appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. Appreciate your kids waiting for lunch.
Get out of the kitchen.
And we will look at setting up a part 2 on this. If you guys want to think up some more questions and send them to us, so she will maybe have some advance notice on those and she can get through the rest of her list. I'll talk to her, see what's convenient, and we'll set that up. But for now, I want to get everybody on their day. Man, we appreciate you guys sharing a little bit of time with us. And, maybe it's just me, but this helps me feel normal. Like we're talking about band stuff again, and we're talking about things to make students more successful. And I just enjoy doing that. So thank you for taking your time. I'm going to call this one good. Y'all be blessed. Everybody stay safe. Wash your hands. Wear your masks. Let's beat this thing and move on. So God bless, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.